Session 7. Prophet Muhammad, the last and final prophet, the man for the mankind, by ex-Brigadier Mustansar Billah. Brothers and sisters, we had finished with Muhammad and the issues of today, and today we shall begin with Muhammad and the human rights. Muhammad and the human rights. Rabb shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri. O my Rabb, open my heart, ease my task. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Human rights are the rights every person has to justice and freedom. Chambers 21st Century Dictionary, Cambridge University Press, 1999. I repeat the definition as per the dictionary. Human rights are the rights every person has to justice and freedom. Chambers 21st Century Dictionary, Cambridge University Press, 1999. Denial of justice, freedom is also a part of the Quranic term zulm, that is evil, injustice. Muhammad, peace be upon him, Muhammad's inexorable mission of life was to eradicate zulm, that is evil, injustice, and establish the supremacy of the writ of Allah. In fact, enforcing the divine law is the only way by which injustice, evil, zulm, that is injustice, evil, can be eliminated, contained, suppressed, and defanged. Muhammad, peace be upon him, came to give, not to take, to give guidance, give cognitive therapy to the misguided mankind, to give peace, love, happiness, to aglow the faces of the poor, the downtrodden, the enslaved, and the deprived by providing them the necessities of life and respect in the society among all the peoples of the world, white, black, or yellow. He gave women their distinct, glittering, respectful place in the society, an inexorable right of inheritance and marriage with consent. He gave shelter to the travelers, wayfarers, gave good food to the guests. He gave away his food even in the process of eating when some hungry came around, though he needed it himself too. He gave love, assistance, protection to the orphans, and assistance to the widows. He rescued and gave the easy way out to anyone trapped in a quandary. He gave the easy way of doing things. He gave the easy way of doing things. He gave wisdom to the mankind. He gave wisdom to the mankind. He gave timely warning to the blind from falling into the ditch of disobedience of Allah. Warned against things, deeds which were dangerous and so verboten that is disallowed by the Creator. He gave to the mankind the message of Allah, verbatim and word for word. He gave pleasure to all while he spoke, and solace by his company. He gave inexhaustible ways to mankind to have a direct one-to-one relationship with the Creator. He gave, I repeat, he gave inexhaustible ways to the mankind to have a direct one-to-one relationship with the Creator, having no mediators at all, having no mediators at all. He gave his time and invested his energies to assist anyone he could. He gave help before people even asked for it. He gave due and rightful place to his wives, relatives, and children, to friends and his companions, and treated them accordingly, giving individual personal recognition and attention. He gave time and attention to the remembrance, worship of his Creator. He gave time and attention to the remembrance, worship of his Creator. He gave his heart to the love of Allah and his Ummah. He gave his heart to the love of Allah and his Ummah, and gave up food to fast for the pleasure of Allah. He gave truth of love and fear of Allah. He gave truth of love and fear of Allah, and that the acme and acid test for the love of Allah was when men elevated themselves to lay down their lives for the cause of supremacy of the word of Allah. Thus, he came to give, not to take anything from anybody or something from the world. So have his followers to learn to give, whether he used to give. So, I repeat, have his followers to learn to give whatever he used to give, that is everything and anything that is conceivably good, and his followers have to give up the evil, and his followers have to give up the evil. It is to be ingrained in the psyche of every Muslim that he has been sent to the world to give as Muhammad did, peace be upon him. It is to be ingrained in the psyche of every Muslim that he has been sent to the world to give as Muhammad, peace be upon him, did, never to demand, ask, or take anything as his right. Give the good, give up the evil. Give the good, give up the evil. Quite strangely different from Western philosophies when Sharia talks of Hukukul Ibad, meaning human rights, rights of the people. It means obligations, duties towards the people, the entire mankind. When Muslims follow Muhammad, peace be upon him's conduct, when Muslims follow Muhammad's, peace be upon him's conduct, the rights of each and every individual are invariably delivered. Nobody then needs to demand, ask, plead, or fight for his rights. As such, there has never been a need for the jurists in Islam to write separate chapters on human rights. One would never find these headings in Sharia. Muhammad, peace be upon him, gave elaborate instructions as to what has to be given. The obligations of every individual towards every individual are unambiguous. The obligations of every individual towards every individual in the society and to the mankind, leaving nothing unsaid, uncovered, or ambiguous. And he also warned against the deleterious, dangerous effects of not adhering to his teachings And he also warned against the deleterious effects of not adhering to his teachings, his sunnah. For example, Muhammad, peace be upon him, elaborated the obligations towards Allah and the mankind. He elaborated the obligations towards Allah and the mankind. In the letter, we find obligations towards these, that is, towards the mankind, the obligations towards these, which I'll give out one by one. Parents, 2 spouses, 3 children, 4 neighbors, 5 orphans, 6 widows, 7 brothers, sisters, and all close relatives, 8 guests, 9 destitute, needy, and poor, 10 co-travelers, 11 sick and the ill, 12 all the Muslims, obligations towards all the Muslims, 13 obligations towards non-Muslim citizens, 14 obligations towards laborers, workers, peasants, etc. Then 15 caliph, people in charge, governing people, authorities, officials, that is the masses towards the rulers, the obligations of the masses towards the rulers. 16 obligations of the caliph, the rulers, people in authority towards the masses, the obligations of the rulers, peoples in authority towards the masses. 17 obligations of borrowers of money, 18 obligations of money lenders, 19 the obligations of dawah, 20 obligations towards those engaged in jihad, fighting in the way of Allah, 21 towards servants and the obligation of servants towards their masters, and 22 towards animals. Then he practiced and taught a host of other obligations like the threat of punishment prior to punishment, and a fair trial, opportunities given to the accused to defend, fight his case. Thus, every Muslim child grows up with the psyche of giving, contributing, making this society, this world, a better place to live, and not demanding some homebrewed, preconceived, or perceived human rights for himself. The motive of doing every good, pious, kind deed is permanently anchored to the pleasure and fear of Allah, not to person's mood, pleasure, inclination, or temporal benefits. I repeat, the motive of doing every good, pious, kind deed is permanently anchored to the pleasure and fear of Allah, not to a person's mood, pleasure, inclination, or temporal worldly benefits. So, whenever a Muslim does any good to anyone, he repeats to himself, I don't seek any reward or returns from you or anyone but Allah, and feels pleasure to have done something good and does everything good with pleasure. I repeat, so whenever a Muslim does any good to anyone, he repeats to himself, I don't seek any reward or returns from you or anyone but Allah, and feels pleasure to have done something good and does everything good with pleasure. Abu Huraira Rasulullah Ta'ala anhu reports that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, Allah would lift off one of the major difficulties of the one who ameliorates, removes any difficulty of a faithful believer on the day of judgment. Allah would make things easy here and hereafter for the one who makes things easy for anyone. He said Allah would invariably cover, hide the faults, shortcomings, failures here and hereafter of the Muslim who covers, hides the faults, shortcomings, failures of a Muslim. Allah remains committed to assisting the individual till the time he is assisting some Muslim brother. I repeat, Allah remains committed to assisting the individual till the time he is assisting some Muslim brother. Allah facilitates the way to heaven for the one who treads a path to educate himself on knowledge about religion. I repeat, Allah facilitates the way to heaven for the one who treads a path to educate himself on knowledge about religion. Muslim. The words of Muhammad, peace be upon him, cover almost all aspects of assisting others, mentally, physically, morally, socially, and spiritually. I repeat, the words of Muhammad, peace be upon him, cover almost all aspects of assisting others, mentally, physically, morally, socially, and spiritually. Those who educate others on the injunctions of Quran and Ahadith are all to be rewarded even in this world apart from the hereafter. Those who educate others on the injunctions of Quran and Ahadith are all to be rewarded even in this world apart from the hereafter. Abu Huraira Raziyullah Ta'ala Anhu state also reported that the Prophet said, peace be upon him, one who looks after, takes care of the widows and the orphans is like the one has the same reward as the one who fights in the way of Allah. Abu Huraira Raziyullah Ta'ala Anhu also reported that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, one who looks after, takes care of the widows and the orphans is like the one has the same reward as the one who fights in the way of Allah. Abu Huraira Rasulullah Ta'ala said, I think he, the Prophet, peace be upon him, also said that he is like the one who is not lazy in worshipping Allah and like the one who doesn't miss a day in fasting. Bukhari, Muslim. Hazrat Aisha Raziyullah Ta'ala Anhu, wife of the Prophet, peace be upon him, states that a miserable poor woman with 2 small daughters came to me. I gave her 3 small dates since there wasn't anything more. The woman gave a date each to both and was about to put the 3rd date in her own mouth to eat. But the 2 daughters asked for that one too. So she divided the 3rd date and gave out half to each. So she divided the 3rd date and gave out half to each. I liked this act of her a lot and mentioned this event to the Prophet. Hazrat Aisha Razulta states, the Prophet said, Allah has made heaven mandatory for her because of this act, deed. Or perhaps he said that the fire of hell shall never touch her because of this act, deed. Muslim. When the parents put themselves to discomfort, work to feed, educate, groom, and bring up their children, especially their daughters, they have such a great reward with Allah, which is difficult for human beings to perceive. When the parents put themselves to discomfort, work to feed, educate, groom, and bring up their children, especially their daughters, they have such a great reward with Allah, which is difficult for human beings to perceive. However, the children be educated, groomed, and brought up to follow Muhammad, peace be upon him, because the parents will be accountable for them. I repeat, however, the children be educated, groomed, and brought up to follow Muhammad, peace be upon him, at all times, everywhere, at all occasions, because the parents will be accountable for the children. Muhammad, peace be upon him, once said, "Women are like a rib or bent, have a vital role. You can't do without them. If you try to straighten them, you will break them. So deal with them as they are." Trimsey. Trying to straighten the rib may lead to divorce. Every situation needs delicate handling. Abdullah bin Umar Razulullah Ta'ala reports that the Prophet said, every one of you will be held responsible, and you will be questioned about those subordinated to you in any manner. The rich will be responsible for those under him. A man is responsible for those in his house. A woman is responsible to look after the husband and the children. Thus, all of you are responsible, and you will all have to account for your obligations to those under you. So, thus, all of you are responsible, and you will have to account for your obligations to those under you. Bukhari, Muslim. As regards the obligations of the wife towards the husband, Hazrat Salma states that the Prophet said, as regards the obligations of the wife towards the husband, Hazrat Salma states that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "The woman who dies in a state wherein her husband was happy with her shall go to heaven." I repeat, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "The woman who dies in a state wherein her husband was happy with her shall go to heaven." Trimsey. With reference again to a man's obligations towards his wife and children, it is reported by Hazrat Abu Huraira that the Prophet, peace be upon him, stated, "There is a dinar which is spent fighting in the way of Allah, and there is a dinar which you give as sadaqah, charity, to destitute and poor, and there is a dinar that you spend on your wife and children. Among all these, the greatest reward is for that you spend on your wife and children. Among all these, the greatest reward is for that you spend on your wife and children." Muslim. Again, with reference to man's obligations towards his family, Abdullah bin Amr bin As Razulullah Ta'ala reports that the Prophet said, it is enough for the man to be sinful that he fails in his obligations of providing food, clothes, religious education to those he has been made responsible for, wife and children. The Prophet said, it's enough for the man to be sinful that he fails in his obligations of providing food, clothes, religious education to those he has been made responsible for, wife and children. Bukhari, Muslim. And lastly, Hazrat Abu Huraira Razulullah Ta'ala reports that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "The upper hand, the one that gives, assists, is superior to the lower, the one that asks or takes. And initiate your expenditures with those for whom you have been made responsible to look after. And the best sadaqah, spending in the way of Allah, is the one in good health with no other motives but the pleasure of Allah, with no other motives but the pleasure of Allah. Tirmidhi. That's all for today. Please pray for me. Jazakallah, ex-brigadier Mustansir Billah.